Hi everyone. This week, the Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, has declared that Ireland's immigration numbers are coming down and that our deportation numbers are going up. In this video, I will be reviewing a document titled Ministerial Briefing January 2025, which was published on the 31st of March 2025 by the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth. This document gives a thorough insight into the workings of the Department of Integration by explaining how many people the state are employing to implement Ireland's mass immigration strategy, including their scope of works, their budgets and so on. And once you consider this information, you will see that this document is at loggerheads with the idea that the Irish government are trying to implement a more stringent immigration policy. We'll get straight into the document. Section 1.2 confirms that the department has an annual budget of €8.2 billion, with 25% of this figure being allocated to the International Protection and Ukrainian divisions. Section 1.3 confirms that the department has 976 full-time staff, with 340 of these employees being assigned on a full-time basis to the International Protection and Ukrainian divisions. And as you can see from the screen, the International Protection Division has far more staff assigned to it than any other division in the department. For example, the International Protection Division has 3 times more staff assigned to it than the Disability Division, or 4 times more staff when you include the Ukrainian Division. Section 2.2 sets out the organisational charts for the department, noting that the International Protection Division has far more units within its division than any other division and includes the following: the state-owned International Protection Accommodation Unit, the Irish Refugee Protection Programme Unit, the Anti-Racism Policy and Funds Administration Unit, the International Protection Procurement Services Unit, the International Protection Accommodation Services Unit, the International Protection Corporate Unit, the Community Engagement and Transparency Unit, the International Accommodation Services Future Operating Model Unit, the Estates and Construction Management Unit, and the International Protection Research Unit. I want to make 2 points on the units I just mentioned. Firstly, in addition to these units, remember that you still have a whole other wing of units under the Ukrainian division. And secondly, when you work your way through the document on the screen, they list other units within this division that are not included in the organisational chart, such as the Strategy and Transformation Unit, the International Protection Support Services Unit, and the IPAS Operations Unit. Section 3 sets out the key issues that each of the divisions manage, the numbers of staff they have and their budgets. We are going to jump straight to Section 3.7, noting that the overview confirms that the International Protection Division has 229 full-time staff, noting that this number jumps to 340 when you include the Ukrainian division. I'm going to read some of the information in this section verbatim given its importance. The document states that the International Protection and Integration Division has responsibility for sourcing and developing accommodation for people applying for international protection in Ireland and for developing and promoting policy on migrant integration. Key areas of responsibility: providing accommodation and other supports to people applying for international protection in Ireland, sourcing, developing and purchasing accommodation facilities for international protection applicants, both on state lands and from commercial providers. Delivery of the Irish Refugee Protection Programme. I'll explain what this means shortly. And finally, development and implementation of the anti-racism policy and a new migrant integration strategy due in 2025. Ongoing work, key issues, areas that need to be brought to the attention of the incoming ministerial team. Ireland has seen a sharp increase in numbers of people applying for international protection over recent years. Our system has had to grow by over 400%. Pressure on accommodation availability is extremely high. The division has extended all teams to meet this always growing demand, and now has nearly 240 staff and an annual accommodation spend of over €1.2 billion. We are also tackling a range of legal, local and criminal challenges to the development of extended accommodation capacity. A range of urgent measures to extend our capacity are in train across the division as part of a comprehensive accommodation strategy published by the government in March 2024. These include developing accommodation options on state lands, identifying properties for purchase, transitioning some Ukrainian properties to accommodate IP applicants, and continuing to procure accommodation through commercial providers. Now, anyone reading this objectively would conclude that the International Protection Division is ramping up, not slowing down, as suggested by Jim O'Callaghan. Under barriers to opening new accommodation centres, it states, huge focus is on developing accommodation solutions, procuring beds, buying properties, converting offices, developing tented accommodation and modular homes on state lands. However, many agreed solutions like local emergency accommodation or development at state lands are subject to challenges and barriers. We have a range of core challenges to the emergency planning process followed in 2024 at state sites, bringing our capacity to deliver on government strategy to question at Thornton Hall, Crooksling, Athlone and other sites. The emergency planning regulations endorsed and followed are failing a range of core challenges. This is really important. The government are acknowledging that the laws that they have put in place to allow those housing international protection applicants to bypass planning laws are failing in court challenges. This section then goes on to state that we have also been subject to orders under the Local Government Act against temporary dwellings which are ongoing. The legal positions place questions over the ongoing developments, and it's likely that a legislative provision will need to be considered to enable implementation of new centres on state-owned sites. So this section is referring to the legal challenges by local councillors in Athlone. And this section is also saying that whatever judgments the courts hand down to stop these developments proceeding will be circumvented by the government as they are considering putting in place further and different laws and exemptions. Section 5, titled People with Status, states, people who have completed their international protection application and have status that allows them to remain in Ireland are not entitled to material reception conditions. They do have entitlement to the full range of housing supports available to all Irish residents. IPAS continues to accommodate those with status until such time that they can progress into the community. At the end of November 2024, 5,360 people with status were being accommodated by IPAS. The department never allows people with status to be left without accommodation. The importance of this section is twofold. Firstly, when the state decides that a person seeking international protection is allowed to remain in the state, that person no longer has any entitlement to remain in IPAS accommodation. They are effectively meant to fend for themselves like any other resident of the state. However, this section states specifically that the department never allows people with status to be left without accommodation, meaning that once again people seeking international protection are given preferential treatment over Irish citizens. Given that there is no Irish government policy to say that no Irish person would be left without accommodation. Section 6 is titled IRPP Travel Issues. Now, IRPP stands for Irish Refugee Protection Programme. You constantly hear the Irish government saying that Ireland has international obligations regarding people who travel to Ireland seeking international protection. The Irish Refugee Protection Programme is an initiative set up in 2015 whereby the Irish government send delegates to other countries, mainly the Middle East and Africa, to search for and select people that they feel need international protection. On the screen you can see an extract from the UN Refugee Agency, which confirms that resettlement is the voluntary transfer of refugees from the country where they are registered to another country that agrees to admit them as refugees and grant them a residence permit. Resettlement is not a right and there is no obligation on states to accept refugees for resettlement. The Irish government decides how many refugees will be resettled in Ireland each year and where they will come from. So Section 6 states, IRPP carried out selection missions in 2021 and 2022 to Jordan and Lebanon, and work is ongoing to resettle the refugees selected as part of those missions. A selection mission took place in June 2024 for the first time in Turkey with Afghans displaced in Turkey, and a mission took place in December 2024 to Bangladesh to select displaced Rohingya for resettlement. So, in addition to the numbers of people travelling to Ireland seeking international protection, the Irish government is also sending people to places like Jordan and Lebanon to search for Syrian refugees to bring them back to Ireland. Just let that sink in. Section 9 has been redacted in its entirety, which is concerning. Section 10 is titled Need for a Whole of Government Approach and Limiting Policies at this Time. This section states there are a range of policy limitations on our ability to extend capacity in the system. Solutions for this would include amending existing secondary legislation to allow more property types to be converted to IP accommodation and to extend the length of time for such use from December 2028 to December 2032, meaning this is ending no time soon. The second bullet point has been redacted in its entirety, again very concerning. And the final section confirms that they intend to repurpose any accommodation used for Ukrainians to instead be used for international protection applicants, which is something that many people have called a long, long time ago. Properties often start off being used to house women and children, potentially from Ukraine, but eventually these people are moved on, and the property ends up being used to house large numbers of undocumented single adult males, which was always the end goal. The next section of the document details the head count in each unit, their scope of works and their budget, and includes the following. The International Protection Corporate Unit, 16 full-time staff, budget of over, I believe it's €111 million. There's an error in where the decimal point is here, so I'm not entirely sure. And just to note that there are so many grammatical errors throughout this document that I personally would be embarrassed to publish it. The Irish Refugee Protection Programme Unit, 15 full-time staff, budget of €5.1 million. The Strategy and Transformation Unit, 11 full-time staff, budget blank. The International Protection Research Unit, 1 full-time staff, budget states not applicable. The Funds Administration Unit, 5 full-time staff, budget €16 million. The International Protection Support Services Unit, 31 full-time staff, budget €364 million. The State-Owned International Protection Accommodation Unit, 21 full-time staff, budget blank. The Community Engagement Team and Transparency Unit, 17 full-time staff, budget blank. The IPAS Operations Unit, 63 full-time staff, budget blank. And the International Protection Accommodation Services Unit, 64 full-time staff, budget states non-budget holder. You will also note that many of the titles for these units don't even correspond with the organisational chart that we reviewed at the start of this video. To conclude, this Ministerial Briefing document confirms that 1. The Department has an annual budget of €8.2 billion, with 25% of this budget being allocated to the International Protection and Ukrainian divisions. 2. The Department has 976 full-time staff, with 340 full-time staff being assigned to the International Protection and Ukrainian divisions, and with only 67 staff assigned to manage disabilities, which means that 4 times more staff are assigned to manage people who are not even Irish residents than there are to manage Irish citizens with disabilities. 3. The International Protection Division has far more units within its division than any other unit within the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, with somewhere in the region of 13 units within the Immigration Division, noting that this excludes the Ukrainian Division. 4. There has been a 400% increase in the number of people seeking international protection in Ireland since 2021. 5. The Irish government never allows people with status to be left without accommodation. 6. Under the Irish Refugee Protection Programme, the Irish government is sending delegates to other countries, mainly to the Middle East and Africa, to search for and select people that they feel need international protection. And 7. The Irish government is currently considering introducing further legislation to allow it to convert more property types while bypassing the planning laws that apply to all other residents of the state to ensure that they can house more and more international protection applicants. That concludes the review of the document. As many of you will be aware, there are several events taking place in Dublin on Saturday the 26th of April in support of Irish culture and heritage. One is taking place at the Garden of Remembrance at 2 p.m, which I will be attending, and another one at Phoenix Park. Please show your support for Ireland. Thanks for listening.